Welcome back to the second tutorial on the Blender game series. My name is Ryan Griziak, and in this tutorial I would like to move our character around using the keyboard. I would also like to set up an end goal for the game. Now, most games are created with an end achievement and some are not, but in any case I want to create a bunch of gems, and when the character picks those up, it will signal the end of the game. So let's get started. Here we have our character and our scene. If we push play, it should be exactly the same. That's good. And we need to start using logic bricks to create movement in this character. So how are we going to do this? Well, first we need to use the physics tab to be able to make this character fall to the ground. And we can do this by scrolling over here at this top menu and under the physics tab changing it from static. Now there are two options which we'll use quite a bit, and that is rigid body and dynamic. Now they both might seem like they do the same thing, but actually rigid body is used to actually create real simulations of spheres rolling or cubes falling, but dynamic is more used for the character creation so that it doesn't roll around when you tell it to move forward. So let's use dynamic. If we click that, you'll see that a bunch of options come in relation to the sphere, but we don't have to worry about those right now. The other thing is we want to create a layout so that we can edit these logic bricks to make it move around. And we can do this by accessing up here next to default under screen layout, we can select the game logic. You'll see that the scene is changed around a bit, and we can just make these windows smaller. We can even take this and we can combine these two windows so that we have more space. And down here you'll see that the logic editor has a few new buttons under it. You can see that there are sensors, controllers, and actuators. Now each of those are going to have an important role in controlling this sphere. Let's go back to texture mode, and you can see that we're back to that similar view. And in order to make this move, we need to add a sensor. So a sensor is something that activates when it's triggered, such as the keyboard or mouse or an event or something that happens. An actuator is something that does something, say movement or changes scenes or different stuff like that. So let's first add a sensor, say a keyboard, and let's add an actuator, such as motion. Now in order to get these to work, you need to connect them by just clicking on this dot here and just dragging over and selecting this other one, and you'll see that a controller has actually been added. Now we can change this from like and or, but unless you know what you're doing, usually the default is pretty good. Now under the keyboard we want to add a key so that we can move this forward. Now I'm going to say that the Y direction is going to be the forward movement of our character. So to do this, I'm going to click down here under the key and click W. Up here, where it says keyboard, I'm just going to give it a name. So, up. And this will help us just to see when we collapse this, what that keyboard sensor is. So now that we have it up and we push P, you'll see that our character falls, but it doesn't move forward when the W is pressed. And that's because we need to set a location over here under the motion. Now if we zoom in, you'll see that each of these sections are an X, Y, and Z. Now each of these will do movement along each of these axes. So in order to move along the positive Y axis, we need to make this number positive, so 0.1. And that's a pretty good speed. So if we do this and we push P, you'll see that when we hit the W key, it will actually move forward. Well, that's good. So now let's add a few more. we want to make sure that we can go down as well. And we can do this by going under the motion, and under the Y, we can say -0.1, or we can click the left arrow by that Y. We can come over here, we can say down. Under the key, we can press S. In order for these to work, we connect them. And that is our up and down movement for our character. And you can see it playing out as we hit the W and S key. Now the problem is this doesn't really work for the rotation. And that is because the rotation acts differently than motion along the axes. But in order to see that, we need to set up our camera. So we're going to click on our camera, hit Alt-R, which clears the rotation. And then we can move the camera over, go into the top view, line that up, go to a side viewer and hit R and then rotate it along the x-axis, and then hit the numpad 0. And here we can see the result that is taking place. We can just move this up a bit, and that looks good. Now, if we go into camera view and hit P, you'll see that the ball drops and moves without the camera. But we want to make sure that the camera follows the sphere, or our character. So how do we do that? We first select the camera, and then we hold down Shift and select our character. By hitting Control P, we can set up a parent which actually connects the camera to the ball. So when we move the ball, the camera moves. When we move the camera, the ball doesn't move. And that's just an easy way to set up different hierarchies. Now if we go into the camera view, we can push P, and when we move, you'll see that the camera following the character. So once we have that set up, we can now test the rotation, because it can be hard to see without the camera. So we're going to add another sensor keyboard, and we're going to click right up here in the name, and we're going to use the D key. And under the actuators, we're going to click motion, but instead of location, we're going to use rotation. Now the rotation that we want is going to spin across the Z axis. So we want to make sure that this is a -0.1, because it's going to spin to the right. Now if we connect both of these, and we push 0 and P, when we push D, you'll see that nothing happens, because we actually should have changed the rotation to -1 instead of the force. So if we go back into 0 and P, and we rotate, you'll see that it rotates exactly like we expected. And that's just a good way to move around the scene. We can copy the same action for the left. So going down to motion or keyboard, then selecting motion, we can connect the two. Up here we can say left, and under the key we can push A. And for the rotation, we can do 1. So if we come up here and push P, you'll see that our character moves just fine. We can even manipulate him up the ramp. You'll see that everything is working just fine. You can even jump off of it. So that's good. Now that our player can successfully move, in the next tutorial, I'll be finishing up how to create the gems. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.